The question is, do you agree that Scotland should be an independent country?
For me, the principle that we work best when we work together.
Well, they didn't.
Very serious.
The referendum. It seems to me that they're not dealing with the issues.
Hello, this is Scottish Independence podcast number 80, and this is the third podcast out in 4 days. We're keeping up a good pace, and I'm hoping I'll be able to do that in the coming months as we get closer and closer to the referendum. This time I spoke to the good people from Generation Yes, specifically Graeme Sneddon, Graeme West and Kirsten Thornton. We talked about their campaign and how it's been going and what they're hoping to achieve with it. So, we'll just go straight to the conversation and I'll have a wee word with you at the end. Hello, so this time I'm joined by three guests from Generation Yes. I'm joined by Graeme Sneddon, henceforth Mr. Sneddon, and I'm joined by Graeme West, henceforth Mr. West, and I'm joined by Kirsten Thornton. How's it going?
Good,
Very well,
yeah.
thanks.
Great, thank you.
We're on here to talk about the activities and the hopes for the campaign for Generation Yes. So I suppose, given that it was Mr. West that contacted me first, I'll go to you first if you'd like to explain how the campaign got started. I suppose we'll start there.
So supposed to be sort of got started around about December last year. We started talking about the ways to kind of get the youth vote engaged. We kind of noticed that there wasn't really a kind of specific youth campaign that was doing anything very much. There was a sectoral group within Yes Scotland, but it wasn't really actively doing any campaign activity. And there were other groups that obviously have a lot of young people in them, but they weren't really kind of addressing all of the issues and questions specifically toward young people. So we thought it was important to do something about that. So we know each other kind of, from various groups that we've been involved in for a while, National Collective, YSI, FSN, various other groups. So we sort of started to get together and think about a way to do that. And this is the result.
So how's it been going?
Pretty well. So we just really made our public launch in the end of March, and we got really good reception to that. So we got sort of front page splashes on the Sunday Herald, the Scotsman, and the Observer. So we kind of launched with a bang. So since then we've been frantically catching up to get all the other kind of back end things done. And
Mr. Sneddon.
Yeah, well, since as Graeme mentioned, since the launch, we've also been receiving international attention in the media. We've had a couple of our ambassadors who've just spoken to a reporter from the Washington Post to give their take on young people in the referendum, and that'll be out in the next week or so.
Was he trying to bully you with Obama's comments?
Not at all, actually. He didn't mention very much, I have to say, but I think he was far more interested in the kind of process of democratic renewal that the Yes campaign in general has been going, and I talked to him a bit about how more and more young people get more and more offers of help every time from young people who are keen to get involved in this campaign.
And Kirsten, how did you get involved? Were you involved from the start as well?
Yeah, pretty much. I think it was just really that we all noticed that this was an amazing opportunity for young people to really get engaged, and that wasn't being harnessed. And we wanted to do something exciting to get them involved.
But who are your members exactly? Because young people is a kind of vague catch-all term. I mean, what sort of age groups is it?
So it's kind of a mixture of people. We've got lots of honorary young people who are dead keen, who are people who are actually kind of technically in our age group of 16 to 30, but they just are a wee bit shy about saying, oh, I'm not really a young person. So we've got loads of helpers and volunteers who are just dead keen to see what we're doing happen. So there's loads of them. There's also a lot of people in the sort of 16 to 18 bracket who are really enthused about the fact that it's the first time they can vote. We've got Saffron Dixon and Liam McLaughlin involved, so they're involved in RIC as well, and they're really dead keen to get the sort of youth vote going. We've got loads of people who are going around talking to schools, so it's a real broad mix of people, loads of 16, 17-year-olds, kind of some younger people who are university students, and etc., and then everybody else who's just want to see us succeed.
That's an interesting point there, because you said from the 16 to 18-year-old group, and maybe I'll go to Kirsten, but when it was announced that 16 to 18-year-olds would be given the vote, I think many people thought it would be a given yes, particularly in that age group. But then the polls tended to show something different. But then it said the kind of no vote, but then it's moved towards yes, and now it's quite an unusual picture. I mean, what do you think's going on there, Kirsten?
I think young people, along with the rest of the population, but especially young people, are starting to realise that this isn't your typical general election with politicians shouting at each other. That this is something completely new, completely fresh, that we have the chance to completely revolutionise the way we do things and the way our country's run. And that's what gets them so excited about a yes vote.
Mr. Sneddon, I do like this Victorian Mr. feel. We had to do this before another episode, but that, just for the listeners, that's why we're doing this, because we've got two Graemes. So it's Mr. Sneddon and Mr. West. But Mr. Sneddon, what kind of events are Generation Yes putting on at the moment?
So we've had a couple of recent Super Saturday canvasses. One we had most recently in Edinburgh, which was quite successful. We had a good turnout, and we got we identified quite a few young people in the centre of Edinburgh, which was really good. Future events, we've got plans for comedy nights, which are hopefully coming as a result of our crowdfunder, which is ongoing at the moment. I'm sure you'll probably ask me a wee bit more about that in a minute.
So we've got the comedy nights planned over the summer. We're also going to be taking part in a lot of future Super Saturday style canvassing events. We had a really good reception to the one in Edinburgh most recently, so we're planning to do more of them. I think probably we'll do them in collaboration with other groups just to magnify the impact. We know that Rick and others are kind of planning some big sort of large scale canvassing across the country. So we just noticed that that's been quite successful, and it's very high impact as well. Aside from that, we're looking forward to all the local groups getting started. So we've got groups in, I think, just off the top of my head, Lanark, Peebles, Macduff, among other places kind of getting started. They have fairs going on, gala days and things that they want to make a big impact at. So they're turning up to things. We're getting requests from people all the time for leaflets from local yes groups. So it's really nice to see everybody kind of taking it into their own hands. People who are 16, 17, 18 are contacting us and saying, I'd really like to get stuck in. Can you send me some leaflets? Can I get a banner? And we can send out as much as we can, finance allowing, which is obviously to do with our crowdfunder. But it's really great to see they're doing a lot of stuff. We were at Yes in the Park last weekend, and also the West End Festival. We did a quite successful, although somewhat cheeky, photo bombing of Better Together. We went along to their booth and held up our banner, and they weren't too pleased, but it was quite a laugh anyway.
I think I'll need a copy of that for the blog page that publicises this podcast. Thank you very much.
Indeed, it was our most liked thing on Facebook ever, and Twitter got something like 200 retweets, so it was good fun. But yeah, lots of stuff's going on, and we're trying to do more and more in-person events. We'll be at some of the higher profile festivals and kind of summer goings on over the summer, but I can't say too much about that yet, but it's certainly got big plans.
Yeah, we've also been getting quite a lot of requests from various local yes groups for Generation Yes people to come and talk at public meetings as well. And we're even getting young people who are saying, I really want to speak at an event, can you point me in the direction of one? So we're getting more and more enthusiasm from our volunteers who are keen to get out there and really talk to young people about independence.
So with the crowdfunder, you mentioned some things there with the leaflets. What else are you hoping to use that money for?
So we've got various plans, and for the crowdfunder, it's we're being quite ambitious in terms of the amount of money we're trying to raise. It's £22,000. That comes out to about almost exactly 20 after the fees are taken away. But that's going on for campaign materials for all the major cities and towns around Scotland. We've targeted the 7 major cities for campaign packs. So those involve things like thousands and thousands of leaflets, briefing documents kind of things, and stuff to use at events to get people to notice you. And so there's 7 major cities, 50 towns across Scotland as well. And we want to identify, as we have pretty much already, youth ambassadors in every place to kind of lead the campaign there. So it's mostly on those materials. We've also got some online stuff planned. We want to use online advertising and other things to kind of get us noticed. Our online presence is already pretty big, so we want to kind of capitalise on that and get outside the yes bubble.
I read something that you're going to be producing an app, which is something that's beyond me. I'm pretty decent with audio editing programs, the odd video editing thing in Skype, but actually producing an app is I wouldn't quite know how to go about that. I don't know who's the techie expert. Is it Mr. Sneddon, Mr. West, or Mr. Thornton? Who's in charge of that one?
I think we all muddle along and do bits and pieces, but the apps, I think it's kind of a first. Nobody's really produced a native mobile app for Scottish politics before, so it's downloadable now. We're kind of soft launching it, just getting people to use it, and I think by the time this podcast comes out, we'll have it publicly launched. But it's a way to get people involved, kind of on the spot. It's less barrier to entry than actually going to a website and finding all the blogs and keeping up with the campaign. Instead of all that stuff, you can just download the app and get started.
Yeah, to add to that, we also have, so that the app's got functionality for things like push notifications, so we can send anyone who's got the app downloaded on their iPad or Android device, they can actually get that little notification saying, oh, here's an event coming up, do you fancy going? Or here's a new new interesting piece of news about the youth campaign for independence that we think you should see, and things like that. It's quite clever. One of the kind of central features of the app is what they call 9+9, and this is it's a recruitment feature which you put in the kind of name and contact details of 9 people who you want to kind of talk to about independence, and through conversations very similar to the main kind of grassroots conversational aspect of the main Yes campaign, you want to try and convince your 9 people to vote for independence in September.
Very interesting idea. Can I just ask, just to change the subject a little bit, is there any kind of young people's Better Together organisation that you've come up against? I'm interested in that kind of thing as well in the campaign.
So we haven't really met them, honestly. I mean, one of the kind of strange things for me about this campaign is that I haven't really seen many campaigners from the other side. I go to a lot of public events and things, and it's difficult to get people to speak. For a start, there was a schools debate the other day where Michael Gray from National Collective and Businesses for Scotland took part, and we were in kind of talks to them about that. And the schools debate was actually delayed by 2 months because they couldn't identify a no speaker, and that's like a pattern that's happening all over the place. It's kind of very strange.
Yeah, it's kind of unusual.
Yeah, I concur with Graeme on that one, because I was invited to speak at a debate at Clyde College, which was cancelled for unspecified reasons. But I had heard that the Better Together had basically stonewalled and refused to provide a speaker. So it's not an isolated incident. It's disappointing as well. I mean, I can understand why people might be voting no, but the running away from debate I find really kind of reprehensible. This is the level that they're treating people, and it's a shame.
Kirsten, when you're out and about campaigning, what kind of reaction are you getting from people in general?
A really positive reaction. People are so pleased to see so many young people involved in any kind of politics, but especially something that's going to be so huge for Scotland. Everyone's so pleased to see young people engaging. And of course, the tide is turning and everyone is coming over to Yes. So the fact that we're not only young people involved in any political campaign, but the fact that we're campaigning for a Yes vote is even better.
I think you're all at university, aren't you?
I am.
I'm a postgrad student.
Yeah, because I'm interested now, because I'm a bit old for that now. But the bear pit of student politics, I'm interested in how this plays out on some of the university campuses. Are there people with stalls? Because at the time I was involved with that sort of thing. It was all the Iraq War, and there's stalls every day, and then there was also military recruiters coming into the unions trying to recruit people without permission and things, and that leads to problems. I mean, have you noticed anything on campus that's kind of unusual, or are the campuses quite charged with it, or is it just as usual, everyone would rather just go to the pub?
I think it's the latter. Everyone would rather just go to the pub. There is a level of engagement, but I don't think it's actively much higher than it is normally. The real difference we're seeing with young people getting engaged is with the 16 to 18-year-old bracket. Universities are kind of just mulling along. People kind of know what's going on, but there's nothing huge. I'm at Dundee, and every now and again there's a Yes stall outside the library, but it's nothing huge.
Unfortunately past my student days, so I couldn't really say, but I would just say that we've had kind of good successes in university debates and things. It's been a mixed picture in terms of the level of activity and how things are run. Like Dundee's had quite a large programme of public lectures and things as part of 5 million questions, but as Kirsten says, the level of actual student engagement has been fairly low. We did have a very good win at University of West of Scotland, and I believe the UHI as well, but it's a mixed picture. The level of turnouts is kind of disappointing in some of these debates, but I think over the summer people's are becoming more tuned to what's happening and to the vote itself.
So the polls are fluctuating with the kind of age group that you work with. How do you feel it's going to go? Do you think that younger people are going to vote for Yes when push comes to shove?
I think I'm quite optimistic about that, because what we've seen is that when young people are given a kind of chance to engage, and for example, when there's a debate, the vote's really responsive to the yes case, particularly because we finally get the chance to actually make it in front of young people without all the things in the way, like the media and other barriers and parents and everything else that are kind of there. When people actually hear the case directly from somebody who knows what they're talking about, they really respond. We've had schools debates quite recently where that's happened, and there's been a dramatic shift of maybe 30 or 40 points across the pre and post debate polls. So I'm not sure about the public opinion polls. I'm not sure what the sample sizes really are, but I think in common with the schools debates and other things, young people are kind of responsive and are listening to it. They might have ideas of wanting to stay in the union right now, but it's a case of having as many contact points with them as possible over the next few months, whether that's through online stuff, whether it's through debates or public events, whether it's stalls, online mobile app stuff. It could be anything, but as long as we kind of keep the message going, I think there's a very good chance.
Do you think there's a huge generational difference in how people get their news about the independence referendum? There's often talk, the older age groups won't necessarily be online as much. I mean, that's a fact. But is it true that, is it true that the younger people tend not to get their news from the television? It's just simply online. I'm not entirely convinced that that's entirely true, but I'll go to Mr. Sneddon there.
I think it's certainly the case. I mean, I believe there was a study done that showed that young people don't tend to copy their parents in terms of voting intentions, which again I think makes me kind of somewhat optimistic, given that there is kind of fairly good research that suggests that certainly in the kind of older age brackets, you're more likely to get, particularly in I think it's pensioners are more likely to vote no, for example. So it's quite good to see that there's kind of no top-down following that voting pattern. But I certainly think that young people do get their news from a mixture of sources. And again, this makes me quite optimistic, because obviously young people, I think, are far more receptive to things like images and social media. I've seen there's many fantastic parody videos, including a brilliant one of the recent Better Together cinema advert. And I think those are starting to get through social media channels, starting to get through to young people as well.
I think the people who use social media more tend to support yes more than those that just watch the television. And I think that's always an interesting thing to consider. Why might that be? But okay, we'll move on just a little bit. Something I've heard recently a number of times is that basically the genie's out of the bottle. Yes or no, all this energy that's going into politics isn't going to disperse. Sometimes I think that's absolutely true, these groups that have come up, but then I think all of these groups are basically yes. So in the event of a no vote, there could be a period of, depression, to be quite blunt. So what do you think is the case? I'll go to Graeme West there.
I'm not sure what the eventual form of all of that kind of energy will be, but I think I don't think you can put the genie back in the bottle. There's so many groups that have come together over what has been a really long campaign, probably the longest referendum or election campaign in British political history, as far as I'm aware. But it's been a long time going. Some of us have been doing this for sort of 2-3 years now. So I think we will find some kind of outlet for it if there is a no. But I think there will be a bit soul searching. But I think we'll find a way to spin it in a kind of positive way and put our energy into something productive. So, I mean, there's already things going on to do with, kind of Citizens Council for Scotland and that kind of stuff. I think there will be a youth equivalent of that, just to kind of make sure that there's some kind of democratic structure or something to represent people's views, people who think that there are higher ambitions and the union isn't really working.
And that was going to be the next thing I'd come on to. What do you think are the prospects for your generation if we stay in the union? I don't know if Kirsten would like to come in with that one.
Well, I don't think there are many prospects. I was reading something written by a recent graduate who knew that all her friends that she's known from university have had to move to London to actually find work. And that's fair enough if you want to move to London. Some people, that's their goal. But you shouldn't have to. You should be able to find work here. But London is sucking the life out of the rest of the country. I mean, Vince Cable described London as like a pile of jam. Everything's going into the top of London, and it's just sort of spilling out the edge. So the southeast of England gets so much attention, so many jobs, and while we get some investment here, I think after a yes vote, the economy, the job market can be invigorated because we'll be able to run our own affairs and make our own policy, and people leaving university and leaving school will have a chance to stay in Scotland and do what they want to do.
Well, that certainly be the hope, but Boris Johnson believes that £1 spent in Croydon's better for everyone, apparently. But I suppose I'll ask the other two about that as well. So, Mr. Sneddon, what do you feel about that first?
Well, I think what's becoming abundantly clear for young people is that if there's a no vote, it doesn't really matter who's going to get in Westminster. We're still going to have the same austerity and the same cuts that are hurting the aspirations of young people. And I think, in particular, the fact that the Tories have made waves. David Cameron at the last, I think it was Conservative conference in 2013, suggested cutting housing benefits for under 25s. I mean, the housing market is already difficult to get into, and that's making a bad situation worse. And Labour are no different. Rachel Reeves has turned around and said that she wants to be tougher than the Tories on benefits. So, those people unfortunate enough not to be able to find a job, they're getting the same kind of demonisation, the same denigration that the current welfare cuts are having on the rest of the population.
Yeah, I think it's remarkable the kind of things that are happening in British politics. I kind of despair sometimes at the things that go on. I mean, I think young people need to have confidence that they will have a future and that there's opportunities available for them. I was reading a blog post this morning which just kind of reminded me of the fact that in 2010 Nick Clegg was pledging against voting on any increase in tuition fees and pledging to abolish them. It just seems that the kind of consensus of Westminster politics is towards kind of austerity and I suppose pleasing the money markets and getting the debt down and all that kind of stuff. And as a result, some things that are really important to young people just go out the window. It's just very kind of depressing. And I think that we've got something different here in Scotland and we should really follow that. So I think that's the kind of most positive thing that can come out of this, is that people can have confidence in their own future in some way. The state will be there to at least give them the framework of opportunity.
All right, thanks. And so now it's time to come to the question that I ask everyone on the show, but this time I have to do it 3 times, so we're getting it in triplicate, which is, what was it? What was the moment? What was the thing you read? What was the moment, the tipping point, or did it always just seem obvious to you that we should have Scottish independence? I don't know who'd like to come in first there. Maybe I'll go from left to right as I see you on my Skype screen. So, Mr. Sneddon, you're first. What was the moment that you decided to support Scottish independence?
I think that the moment for me was when I kind of looked at the kind of economic argument and found that, Scotland, well, we pay our way within the Union, indeed more than pay our way within the Union. And from that point, I just thought, well, if we are able to afford independence, why are we not doing it now? And from that point onwards, I mean, I've never really seen any kind of real positive argument for the Union. It's always been independence will be a disaster because X, Y, or Z, And for me, it's just a case that, we are, I think we are more than capable as a country to manage our own affairs and take responsibility for our own political decision making, and I'm working as hard as I can to make sure we can do that.
Kirsten?
I'm from Cheltenham originally, and I went down in 2009 to visit some family and some friends, and they were talking to me about university and expressing a concern about how I would pay for it, and I then informed them that I wouldn't have to. And it was that realisation then that if I had stayed in Cheltenham and hadn't moved up to Stirling, then I would have then be facing possibly having to pay £9,000 to go to university. And that kind of triggered that realisation that look how lucky we are to have devolution. We've done so much with devolution. What could we do with independence?
Finally, Mr. West.
Well, I'm unfortunately old enough to remember the Iraq War as a sort of late teenager, and I suppose that was a big influence in terms of realising that Britain was fundamentally a place that wanted to maintain status in the world no matter what the cost, and I found that really quite depressing. But more than that, looking at what happened in the AV referendum and other things really put me off my previous kind of notions of federalism, and I just kind of concluded that there was never going to be any more than very gradual change in the constitutional setup in Britain, that the kind of demographics were just against any kind of radical change, or even subscribing to European norms like having a written constitution, having a Bill of Rights that's kind of unassailable. And more than that, as a Glaswegian, I think there's things about the way that things are done in the west of Scotland that are a result of the fact that we don't have a sense of responsibility for our own future. I think there's a lot of untapped potential in the west of Scotland, especially Glasgow, to firstly, reduce poverty, which is pretty in a dire state, but there's lots of other things too. Glasgow could be a world-class city, and it just needs to kind of rediscover itself, and I think that's a kind of interesting corollary of independence.
All right, thanks very much. And would you just like to give another little reminder for your crowdfunder? Where can people go to find it, and when it finishes on Sunday, I believe, but where can people go again?
They can find it on Indiegogo. If they just search for Generation Yes, that's probably the easiest way. We also have a short link, which is votey.es/fund youth. So that's votey, all one word, .es/fund youth.
All right, thanks very much. So that's been great to have you on. It took us a while to get it set up, but we did finally. So thanks to Kirsten. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you. It's been nice talking to you.
Thank you, Graeme Sneddon.
Thanks very much.
And thank you, Graeme West.
Thanks, Michael.
So there you go. That was Kirsten, Graeme and Graeme. And if you'd like to donate to their campaign, all the links are on the blog page where you found this at michaelgreenwell.wordpress.com. We've had a lot of new listeners recently, so if this is your first time listening to the podcast, we've also got a back catalogue. So I suggest you go and have a little search for Scottish Independence Podcast on Spreaker or on iTunes, and you'll find them all. Or you can search them again on my website. So, that's it for this time. As usual on the podcast, the guest gets to choose the tune, and this is what Kirsten, Graeme and Graeme chose. Speak to you next time.
Maybe if you were some spearheaded guy, I would listen to what you have to say. But you're just some incapable figure, thinking you're bigger than me. But you're not yet. You don't know a thing about the youth of today. Stay